When I think about the building, and particularly the sanctuary, I think of the many stories that have, so to speak, been absorbed into the building itself. It's amazing when you think of all the people who have come through the portals of our sanctuary over the years. And much of the richness of our congregational heritage has to do with all of these stories, which taken together represent really our story. One of the interesting things about our congregation is that it is a downtown congregation, and we pull from literally every direction. That's also true spiritually. We have people who come to us from all walks of life, from many, many different faith traditions. And again, part of our richness is the fact that we draw from so many, many quarters. And when we get together and share those stories, we begin to gain a sense for who we are and where we have been and where we are going. And one of the wonderful things is that as we share these stories from the past, we are also preparing for the stories that we will be telling by virtue of our participation in this congregation in the future. And all stories here are welcome because we are a very friendly and accepting congregation and we life, but we anticipate and look forward to the stories that have yet to be shared as we continue to take our place serving and loving God and serving other people in our downtown community in the decades that lie ahead.
I go back a long, long time, and in fact, I'm guessing only 3 or 4 or 5 people who were ever in the old church. And I'm one, although I was not associated with the church, I was in the old church because back in that same year, churches around town were offering a midweek Bible class, and then they were letting us out of school early to attend. Well, I was going to school at Lovell Street School, which was where the old Bronson Hospital was. But my church was way out South Burdick Street, and I tried to get there. No way, even running. So there were 3 or 4 evidently who were associated with the Congregational Church, and so I went with them just up through town and through Bronson Park to the old church to a midweek Bible class. And I think I was in there, maybe 2 or 3 times, because it was the fall of the year the church burned. I was 9 years old. So I remember it as a beautiful, beautiful church. It was a large sanctuary. And so I say I was 9 years old, and then I also, that same winter, the story was, there's a big fire downtown, and I lived only 8 blocks from downtown. So I hurried downtown, and I stood across Bronson Park and Academy Street and watched the church burn. And this is really Robert Wordsmith Longfellow, but really Desort, and it's called The Burning. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the fire that burned our church so dear. On that wintry day in '25, hardly a man is yet alive who remembers that fateful day and year. There were some church people there, evidently, and they were begging the firemen, please save the beautiful, beautiful rose window. Impossible, you know, what with fire hoses and everything else. The whole works went, and all was left standing was the brick wall. However, the beautiful red stone foundation in our church now on the Academy Street side is what was saved from the old church. So part of the old church is in our new church building.
I'm Lorene Dunwell, and I came to Kalamazoo in 1929. to teach music, and I don't remember the dates. I remember singing in the choir, but I don't know just when I joined the church, whether it was about 1930 or 31, when I directed the choir, and I did that for about 6 years, but it was in the early 40s. And I came from Edgerton, Wisconsin, and my father had been a congregational minister, and so I was steeped in congregationalism. But Torrance Phelps was the minister when I came here. Well, one thing I particularly remember is that it was when even the teachers didn't get paid for about 3 months, and it was in the Depression, 1929. And so we had a little club down at church called the Bachelors Club. And we meet down there a couple times a month and either play bridge or dance to recordings we had. And I remember that Bob Corstans brought Morris down to one of the meetings, and that's where I met my future husband.
Oh.
You know, but that was quite a popular organization. Lasted quite a while, too.
I'm John Correll, and we have been Congregationalists all our lives, including our parents before that. So it was a very natural thing for us to become members of the church here.
Dr. Locke was the minister when we first came.
When we first came, well, I remember we were at our home playing poker. No, we were playing bridge, actually. Didn't make any difference. But somebody came to the door, and here it was the congregational minister. And boy, our entertainment disappeared from the table right away. Everything got real quiet.
Yes, I remember I said, "Good evening, Dr. Locke, do come in." We were so pleased. We were a young married couple at that time.
Well, of course.
And we were pleased to think he came. It was like 9 o'clock at night and it was dark. And I said, "Good evening, Dr. Locke, come in." And I turned around. The glasses were all gone and a plate of fudge on the table. It was a different day in those days. And he came in and visited with us all evening. And our neighbors went home. Plymouth Club was very active. Plymouth Club was made up of members of young people of the church. Well, like we were the young married people of the church. And we had a potluck every Friday night, every other Friday night, and we never missed it. We just planned our week over at Plymouth Club. We couldn't do anything on that Friday but come to Plymouth Club.
There wasn't any television.
No, there wasn't television at that time. But most of our friends, our closest friends, were from Plymouth Club.
Well, I joined in 1936 when I married Dick McCumber, and he lived in Kalamazoo, and he and his parents belonged to the First Congregational Church. So where was I going to go? To the First Congregational Church. Dr. Locke was the minister at that time.
And I was just talking to Jane, and she said that when Keys first came to Kalamazoo, there were only 30 people in the congregation. They went out and visited every single day.
I'm Helen Overby.
I'm Charlie Overby, and we've been in Kalamazoo since about 1945, and we think we joined the church around 1946. I've been thinking for some time, wondering about the stimulus to join, or encourage us to join the church? And I can't remember. Can you?
Yes, we were, when Charlie belonged to the Methodist Church and I belonged to the Christian Church, and we were looking for a neutral ground so that both of us would be comfortable. And I think the thing that really started us here was Carrie Oscoby. She was the parish caller then. And you barely got home from church and she was at your front door calling on you and letting you know that the church was there and what was available for you. And the thing that I remember the most about her was that she always wore a hat and gloves, and she always came to visit when you were washing your hair or doing something that was terrible, you know. And here this lovely person was standing on your front doorstep. But I think she was a parish caller here for years, and I think that she really contributed as much as Bill Keith did to the people that joined the church.
Lee Brown. My husband and I moved to Kalamazoo in 1950, and our daughter was going to K College as a freshman, and we were doing something we had never done. We were shopping for a church. I had been raised Presbyterian, so we went to the Presbyterian church, and we weren't terribly excited about that. Sorry to say that. But anyway, then we decided to go to the Congregational, and Lorene Dunwell, who you met, was sitting here, was the first person who came up to me after the first church service and invited me to join the Women's Fellowship. And I had always been in the music of the church, so I didn't know what that entailed. But she included me in the Ann Bradford Guild, and we joined. Dr. Keith was, of course, responsible for most of it because he was very friendly, and we liked his sermons, and the music was lovely. And then I began to be director of the carol choir for 7 years, from 50 to 57.
Well, from what I understand, I wasn't there. I wasn't in the church at that time, but I understand that he was one of the peak ministers in the whole history of the church. Now, of course, I've heard a lot of that from his wife, who is one of his best fans. But
you met Dr. Keith and
Harriet.
Yeah.
Harriet lived here for a while, so we got
here,
to know a lot about the church, and she just thought that he was the real cohesive force in the church, and probably was at that time. I wasn't here.
Well, Harriet ruled, I'll tell you. Any new person coming into the church, she told them which guild to belong to. She really and truly ran the church.
She was an old-fashioned minister's wife. Well, she went to the meetings. This was a point.
Oh, yeah.
She knew what was going on in every facet of the church.
Yes.
But she was a very charming lady. Don't let me give the wrong impression.
Right.
We all liked her.
So that when the next minister's wife came, and she wasn't inclined to do all that, I mean, they were sort of expected to, and so you were disappointed. But actually, the minister's wife shouldn't have to do all that. But Harriet really did much, much more than anyone should have been expected to do. But she enjoyed it.
Another highlight in our church was when we built the chapel.
And it was a wonderful coming together of everybody and all the money that had to be raised.
The church at that time was not like the Baptist church. Some of our people drank alcohol once in a while. So the talk I gave...
Some of them did what?
Some of them drank alcohol once in a while.
Oh.
So the talk I was asked to give was, well, contribute to this more than you contribute to alcohol during the year.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Raise the money.
I don't know if you remember that in the chapel, the windows were designed by Bill Keith. And they have a lot to do with modern days rather than the kind that we had in the other chapel.
But we were very good friends of Bill and Harriet's. Bill would often stop by our house on the way home at night. They lived only a few blocks from where we lived.
And we often had our dinners, Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners together, if it wasn't involved in the church, but personally, and Bill used to drop over at Christmas morning and watch our kids unwrap their presents. Well, we've known them awfully well, that's obvious.
In fact, we always had cinnamon rolls before we unwrapped the presents, so Bill would come early so he would get in on that. He'd get up early at home so he could come and have cinnamon rolls with us and then unwrap the presents that our children had.
Sue Baden. I've been a member of the church for 41 years. We were invited to come to church one Sunday by Phyllis and Robert Hunter. We felt very comfortable and we were welcomed by 3 ushers, Cy Larson and Walter Briney and Archie Potter. And they were so nice to us. And then on Monday night, after we were there on Sunday, the Keiths came to see us, Dr. and Mrs. Keith. And they said, we hope you continue to come to church, and we'd like to have you join. And Mrs. Keith said, I've got 2 guilds that you could be interested in, Ann Bradford and Susanna Winslow. And Phyllis was in Susanna Winslow, so I said, well, I think that was the one I would like to join. There were, I think, 6 guilds at that time, and there were 200 in Women's Fellowship. We have most of the girls that were in the guild when I joined are still in the guild.
Now, Susanna Winslow, they've done some pretty important projects for the church over the years, haven't they?
Yes, and then we put on luncheons, and we would have maybe and mother and daughter banquets, and we would have probably 100 people. And there was one guild, I think it was the Priscilla Alden Guild, that always gave always put on the Thanksgiving dinner. And they would have some of the younger girls help, but they always were the ones in the kitchen. And of course, we had, at that time, we had a cook.
Well, the reason that I'm in this church is because of my folks. They were here. Peter and Marion Boers were members of the church, and so obviously when I came along, I was just ingrained in this church for years and years, several years. And so that's where I go back. And I just remember things about that Mom and Dad did down here. Mom's guild was the Priscilla Alden Guild, and they did the weddings and receptions in the basement. And they could do wonders to that ugly basement down there, setting up wedding receptions with the frilly tablecloths and the pretty punch cups and so forth. Irving Gilmore was fun. The women, these Priscilla Alden ladies, when they put on the blind dinners, which he started. Then they would serve the blind, they had a name, Blind Association or something, and they would come down here for their dinner. And Irving always footed the bill. He paid for the dinner. But the Priscilla Alden ladies cooked it and served it. And then when Christmas came, he always had some little gift for all of these guild ladies. And my mother was so proud. She got a little, I think it was a little clock sort of a thing, keychain, something or other. Irving Gilmore gave me this, you know, she just, and I always laughed and I said, yes, but Mother, he gave them to all of the ladies. But boy, as far as my mother was concerned, Irving Gilmore gave her that for Christmas.
Well, I'm Marion Rumble now. I used to be Wheeler. My folks, Martha and Claude Wheeler, were very active in the church for years on lots of different committees. And so my sister and I naturally came to Sunday school, and eventually I joined the choir, and I was in the choir for over 30 years, I guess.
I used to have youth groups for the college folks.
Student fellowship.
Student fellowship. And I met Mary in the student fellowship, and we were kind of courting our last years of college. And like she said, I went into service. I was going to get married then, but they figured I better wait till I got back.
One thing that I think both of our children mentioned when I was asking them what they remembered about the church was the ice cream socials that we always had every summer. And that was sponsored by the Boy Scout troop. And Helen and Harry in the Sunken Garden at that time, right? Helen and Harry Benson were so active, and all the moms, of course, had to make a cake and turn it in, but we had lots of good times that way, and the Scout troop gained from it.
It was when I came back alone with the children, that I joined the Ann Bradford Guild, and that always meant a lot to me over the years.
Irving Gilmore used to sponsor for that blind group?
I do remember that, and I was on a committee with him for a while. It was called the Art and Music Committee, and so I was always glad in later years when he went on to very big things that I had had a chance to know him. He was such a quiet, down-to-earth person.
Yes, he was.
And you just didn't know what all he was doing. And we learned later how much he did.
And then I did meet this very nice young man that I liked a lot, but he was going to the Reformed Church. And I thought, oh, no way, you know. And so, but he said no way either. He had had enough of the Sunday afternoon Dutch services that he was supposed to go to. So that was fine with him. So Dick joined the church. And we were married here. You know, it's something to be standing there at the back of the church on your father's arm and walking down that long aisle to the man that you love that's waiting for you at the end of that aisle. And that happened 53 years ago. The sad part is that after 50 years of marriage, I walked down that aisle again for Dick's funeral. But, you know, it was all a part of this church. And this is where it needed to be. We'd been here forever, so there's a beginning and an ending there.
One of the things that we enjoy very much is the tolerance of the church, both from a spiritual and faith perspective and from a social perspective. And that is one of the things that we enjoy and keeps us coming back.
We've had 3 children baptized here, Brian, Dusty, and Andrea. Done all the youth group things and the children's activities, the
choirs, the bell choirs for the kids. We're in the library now, and I've been doing the library for maybe 10 years, which is very rewarding.
My involvement at this point is principally through the KDCCC board, and that's another thing that we very much enjoy. We enjoy the downtown location of the church, and the outreach program through the KDCCC is important to us, and it's something that I hope that the church will continue to support.
Another memory I have is of our visually impaired person dinners that we've been doing. It used to be the Sarah Eaton Guild, which was a guild that started up and then sort of morphed into what is now the Soul Sisters. And we're no longer doing the dinners, but we did them for maybe 20 years, and not just us, other groups, other women's groups in the church, and it was a fun experience. That's how you get to know people. You work with them, and we worked. It would be hard work to put on a dinner and serve it and clean up, but it was very enjoyable. Afterwards, we wouldn't always go home right away. We'd sit around and chat. And occasionally, we went out and had a drink somewhere. We had a good time. It was good fun getting to know the other women.
My name is Edna Thompson, and I returned to the church. Initially, what brought me to the church was my parents emigrating from Scotland when I was 9, and we came to this church, and we're here for, I believe, 3 years. And then my parents did move churches, but I obviously never forgot this one because I came back. And when my husband and I, Ron, moved back to Kalamazoo with our own family, we were trying to find a mix. He had been Methodist. We were trying to find a nice mix for us. And I remember this with very warm feelings, and so we came and never left. We were greeted really friendly by Robert Bowens at the time, and he was wonderful to my kids and to me and Ron and to me. If I can sing in this building, that just touches my heart. I loved seeing my kids walk up to the same music for Sunday school on the steps as I walked up to when I was here. It's a lot of nostalgia for me, which for my husband would be different because he wasn't here as a child, but I'm a very traditional person and I love the traditional worship. If I go way back, when I was in the carol choir for a while, Naomi Stuckey was the director. I can remember being in a show downstairs in the basement. She put on South Pacific, and we were all in that. Later, we've had several directors since Ron and I came back to the church. I've enjoyed really each and every one of them. I love Helene Sturwald. She's very special to me personally, and I think she gives so many gifts to the church. And all of that enriches why I want to be here. I love Bob Noblette. I love the messages he gives. I look in the pews and I can still see people that aren't here anymore. People that I remember, Josephine Spalding, who was my friend. And to me, when I walked in the church when she was living years ago, she was the smile that welcomed me to church. And even though she's not out there, I still see her in my mind's eye when I walk into church. There are different people who I relate to as doing different things for me. Some are still here, some are not, but to me they're still here. They're still a part of the history of this church, and all the people that contributed, the years and years that Harold Davidson sang with the choir, just umpty-ump years. And those are the things. It's a building process, and that's what means the most to me.
I feel that I experience God, if you can put it that way, through lots of things, certainly the music, and through the people. And I feel very close to God through our music and through the people. And that's always been very important to me, and I'm thankful that I grew up in the church.
We moved down to Kalamazoo in 1968 and started visiting churches. So between 68 and 69, we kind of settled on this church, and Dr. Keith visited us, but he was retiring, so we decided to wait until the new minister came before we actually joined. But we came because of all the churches that we visited, this was the friendliest, and the comments we've gotten over the years is that this is a very friendly church. So it was the interaction of various people that made such a difference in our picking this church.
Well, the first time I ever set foot in this church was in 1949. I was a freshman at Western. And a friend of mine who I had met the first week in school said, "There's somebody here I want you to meet," who was a young man that she had met the previous year. And we met down standing in front of the organ. And it turned out to be my husband. So that was in 49. And so we came here to church during college most Sundays. And then we left, and we got married in 52, and he went in the Army, so we moved to Virginia. And then we finished school at Michigan and came back here and joined the church, I think, in 1954 or 55. I'm not sure which it was. I joined a guild probably in 1955 or 56. It was a new guild, Susanna Winslow Guild. It had just started that year. And I've been in it ever since, and I would say that that's probably one of the reasons that keeps me here. It's like a family. The whole church is like a family, but the guild is a particular group of friends that, excuse me, that I've known since, well, 50 years. So as far as good memories of the church, or particularly fun memories of the church, we used to have at Pilgrim Haven. And I can't remember exactly under whose ministry that was begun. I think it was maybe Reverend McCutcheon that suggested we do that. Pilgrim Haven was a church camp that we no longer own out south of South Haven. And it was just an old campsite with these old camp buildings. It was not luxurious by any means, but it was camp. And it was really fun. Families there with babies, I had up to high school kids. And so it took in a wide variety of activities. And they'd have craft things for the little kids, and we'd play games at night, we'd play charades. I think one time we had a caller and we did square dancing. And during the day, we'd be down on the beach playing in the water. And it was just a very low-key, just a fun thing. And we did that for, I don't know how many years. I think we went at least 5 or 6 Memorial weekends.
There was a big fireplace there, so when it was wet, you'd have thousands of shoes lined up in front of this open fireplace, and if your shoes were in the front row, then they melted. It was a big fire.
And our church didn't do this. This was the UCC that sold it, because before then the women went over for weekends, and the kids went over for a couple of weeks, but then too in the summertime. And there were other groups that used that camp over there quite a bit. And also then when we had some outings in the summertime, we would meet over there, and all of us would eat in a great big barn-like dining room that they had. And it was a delightful place to be out and walk down on the beach and to be there.
We all know that we went through a bad time here at the church with some personnel, but the fact that we all stuck together, and Dick and I wouldn't ever have thought about leaving. This was, we needed to be here to pull ourselves through this bad time, and made us stronger.
My family moved here from Mishawaka, Indiana, where we lived during the war years. We were in Kalamazoo prior to that. Not a member of this church, however. So when we came back, our parents told us, well, let's visit churches. You don't need to necessarily go to the one that we went to before we left. See? So left it up to my brother and myself to then make a decision. So we visited some churches. I don't remember how many, but in any case, we came here a few times, and it was a friendly place, probably more friendly than other ones we attended. What really did it, however, was our junior high boys Sunday school class, which was taught by Ward Wheeler. He was an industrialist in town. He, after a couple of Sundays going to his Sunday school class, one day he announced that, gave us a challenge, that those who can come up with 100% attendance through the season, I'll take you to a Chicago Cubs baseball game. That did it. Okay, so we told our parents, hey, this is where we want to go.
We've been members of this church for 35 years, which, if you look in our lifespan, it's half of our life. And most of the time when we had children, our 4 children grew up in this church, and they look back on the traditions that are here, like the Easter service and the Christmas service, with great relish, and they complain every time it changes because it's something different than they grew up with. We've had a lot of interesting experiences with the kids in this church, and I think Elaine wanted to tell about some of those.
Well, I wanted to say first that Cindy Charnley brought us to this church. We had gone to several others, and she kept saying, come to the First Congregational. And so we came in 1969. We joined with Jim McCutcheon and his wife. I think our years in the choir have given us a lot of great memories of some of the beautiful requiems we've sung. But we have 4 children, as Jerry said, that grew up in this church. And Chris, who comes to church now, we were so proud of him. He was in the pageant, he was a wise man, and he came down the aisle singing a solo and the beautiful costumes that we had. And I said, Chris, I'm so proud of you. And he said, that was the worst day of my life. He was so scared, you know. And then Jamie, our next son, was a little drummer boy in the pageant, and this is when Millie Dupont was there, and we didn't have Andy Nix for the first time, and Millie was so worried about Jamie being the little drummer boy, and he did fine. And the one I remember the most is our youngest, Andy. He was 5 in kindergarten, and the Sunday school was putting on some kind of play where they came down the aisle, and he was Jesus. And the other children got very scared that they couldn't say their parts in this big church. And so the Sunday school teacher decided to be the narrator up here and narrate all their parts. Well, Andy had learned his line. He was Jesus. He said, I will make you fishers of men. So he came down the long aisle, and she was saying it, and he got this look on his face just like this. And he said it louder than she did, I will make you fishers of men. He didn't look exactly like Jesus.
In terms of looking down the road, I'm encouraged by what's happening in downtown Kalamazoo in terms of especially the shops, restaurants, entertainment, and lots of apartments and condos going in over these stores, which means people are moving here downtown, and some of them, I hope, will wander over on Sunday morning.
I'm Tom Gilmer, and Diane and I joined the church in about 1988, so we've been here a little more than 15 years. We had searched for a place to worship and had done quite a bit of visiting around churches and went to some churches for several weeks at a time just to get a real flavor. You don't go once and walk out. And we came to this one in our journey and found it to be a church that intellectually, I think you have to be a little bit more, there's more challenge here to be a Christian than in some places. It's not simplistic. I was raised in a pretty fundamental Bible church where the message was pretty much the same every week. And in this church, I think it makes you think a great deal more about being a Christian and what you need to do to be a disciple of Christ, rather than just giving us a set of rules and what's right and what's wrong. It allows, I think, more intellectual freedom for people to make decisions about what they believe and how they need to apply those beliefs to the way they live. In doing the things that I'm doing, one thing that being moderator does is it makes you look at the church differently than is as a regular parishioner. And you become concerned with all of the things that are necessary to keep a church viable in a community like this. We are under competition from neighborhood churches and within suburbs, and we are tended to be people who come to this church now come here for the theology and the style of the intellectual style of worship, and so we're not drawing from a neighborhood like suburban churches are, or small town churches even do. And I don't think people in those places worry as much. And so we need to make ourselves attractive in a way that we have something to offer people that they can't get elsewhere. We have many blessings in this church, and we need to be good stewards of those blessings. We need to continue the tradition. We're an important historically to Kalamazoo. The building is significant, but it is not the church. It is not the most important thing about the church. And we certainly have much to offer, and sometimes I think we keep our light under a bushel and we do not make ourselves as available to the community as we should. Downtown Church has a special mission and has some service to offer, and we need to make sure that we do the things that will perpetuate our future.
I'm Helene Sturwald, and this is my husband John Sturwald, and the reason I came to the church was for a job. I had been working at an Episcopal church, and before that had been subbing several places, but I was enticed here by the wonderful organ. I started out 15 years ago, and I've been here that long, and I think several things have kept me here. Number one is the wonderful music program that we have here, and the high quality and the many different styles that we pursue. Number two is I love the bells, and after I had been here only 9 months, I was given the opportunity to direct the bell choir, and that has been a constant source of joy for me.
Certainly occasions when there have been sickness or hardship in the family or something like that, we hear from more people at First Congregational than we hear from anybody else.
Yeah, I'm Scott Kellogg. I've been a member of the church for over a decade. Came here with my family, wife and my 2 children. We have always lived in the Kalamazoo area primarily, but we're drawn to the church largely because of its inclusiveness, its intelligence, its vibrancy and great music scene, but always impressed with the care and the intelligence of the people around us.
Maybe you can tell us what draws you to church leadership here?
I think it's a great opportunity to be bigger than our jobs and bigger than our responsibilities as whatever our individualness is as a parent or as a spouse or as a member of a neighborhood. It's a different community. It's a community that we choose. It's also a place where we can strive to be better than where we are normally, and it also is a great place to rejuvenate ourselves as well. And council work, I think, is really important. Committee work is very important because it provides opportunities for people to do things they wouldn't normally do in their regular daily work. And that sense of service, I think, is really gratifying. A lot of special moments. Obviously, all the fellowship is always nice. I think the friendships and the things that are created outside the church are very, very enriching as well. But to come together after all those enriching experiences and then have a moment to share something communal in church is very important. As a member of the choir, it's a celebration every time that we sing, and that's an important part of my enjoyment of the church, and also a great place to serve. But there's a Thursday night practice, which is great and fun and good fellowship, and then also Sunday to offer that as part of the service is inspiration and also just gratifying to be together again. Largely, that's it. I mean, it's a weekly thing for me. It's not necessarily a specific moment. I think there's cause for celebration too every time someone calls with concern, or with not only concern, but just, you know, how are things going? I mean, that's really it for me, more than it is auctions and meals and things like that, which are all fun. But those interpersonal connections are the most important thing.
Now, your kids have been involved in some of the youth activities, haven't they?
Yes.
What are some things that they've brought home to you that they have enjoyed, or?
Well, I think, interestingly enough, we've all been teenagers, and that sense of spirituality is something that they don't necessarily quite understand yet. We definitely wanted them to be part of the confirmation process, and they like most, said, "Do we have to?" And said, "Yes, you do." And they were quite surprised with what they had learned, that they wrestled with faith for the first time, really on their own and on their own terms, as opposed to just within Sunday school. But they had to answer for themselves as individuals, and I think that was the important part for them. And then the whole confirmation experience was one of those moments, you know, to see your children up there and to be very well-spoken and well thought out about where they are in their lives, and to be honest and truthful about that was really a wonder to see, because they're not always telling us what they think. So for them to publicly proclaim it was really a neat thing, and I think they enjoyed that as well.
So what have you guys been doing this year?
We plan on going on a mission trip to Colorado if we can raise enough money. That should be like, we want to take a plane.
Really?
But we probably can't. You know, we sell brownies and stuff, but you know, that'd be a lot of brownies. It's like Mickey.
Right.
No, we'll do charter bus. Let's take a charter bus.
What do you like about First Congregational?
It's cool. It's so cool. There's like all these little trap doors and stuff. Yeah. And plus, like, I've been going here since I was little, so I got all these great memories in this place.
Yeah?
The people are fun.
People are fun?
I'm going to Lockins.
I'm Pam Casino, and
I'm Mark Casino.
we've been attending this church probably since I started coming here in the summer, early fall of 1991, when we were first worshiping in the chapel during the summer, and fell in love with this church. Mark and I got married here in this very room.
Right at this spot.
Right in this spot. Thanksgiving weekend that same year, so this has always been a special place for me. One of the things that's always drawn me here is that we have such a wonderful music program, and it's such an uplifting part of my life to be able to be here and hear the music. Another thing that has been pretty exciting over the last 2 or 3 years is we went through quite a long and intensive process to identify the needs of our organ, and found that it was on its last leg, and we had really no other choice than to replace it.
You know, the Thanksgiving dinner and the Pilgrim Sunday is pretty unique. That was the first time I came to that was very interesting.
And Mark was our tithing man one year and dressed up in his traditional garb.
Yeah, traditional pilgrim garb, thanks to the courtesy of the Halloween shop.
And it's been a tradition we've kept up for the last 3 or 4 years.
But it's also fun to think about the roots and the origins of the church.
I'm Sharon Williams, and I've been a member of First Congregational Church for, well, let's see, about 12 years now. I joined in October of 1992. I started attending the church a couple of years before I joined. I was church shopping. I was relatively new to Kalamazoo. I'd been here for a while, and I had attended some other churches, and I especially liked the friendliness of the congregation. And when I grew up, I was a member of a UCC church. I grew up in the Evangelical and Reformed Church and was confirmed, and then it became part of the UCC. And so the order of worship was familiar to me. The reliance on individuality was appropriate for me. I also am very supportive of the church's social missions and their view of the world in general. So First Congregational was a good fit for me.
Well, I'm Cindy Stewart, and I grew up in this church, so I probably spent the first 16 years of my life coming here. And then we moved away, or I moved away, and was married and came back and brought my husband, Rick Welch, back with me. And we rejoined the church, and we've been here another 16 years.
And I grew up in Iowa in a congregational church. So when Cindy and I had moved back here in 1988, it seemed to be a natural to be able to go to church with her grandfather and her father and her mother at the time. And I was relating to the new choir director this morning. One of the fondest memories I have of this church was when it was full for her mother's funeral, and what a tribute it was to Cindy's mother, Winnie.
I think one of the things that I get emotional, that you don't realize on a day-to-day basis is that when you are in trouble and your life is hard, all of a sudden this greater church family you have is there for you. I mean, with my mother's death, the cards and the letters and the constant support, and feeling like you can come here and be, people understand wherever you are in life, whether you're at your best or not at your best. And I think some of the other, happier, memorable times are the baptism of our children in the church, and we're always so proud to bring family members from out of town to this church. It's just it's a fabulous place. It's spectacular. It's like you would go to London and want to see a church like this, and that support that also is very respectful of your own privacy. It's not like you've joined a club that you're
that you have to live up to.
Yeah,
you can just be yourself.
That's one of the things that I like about our community.
We're 4 choir directors later, we're still members and happy to be here and official members of the congregation. I think what brought us here and kept us here is the people, and a big part of that is Bob Noblette. He's been a personal friend of mine and a support of mine in some difficult times, and it's important to me that he's here. But also the people of First Congregational are fantastic. They've been more supportive than any group of people we've ever been associated with, and they're just a fantastic church family, and we couldn't be happier.
We have no immediate family in Michigan or anywhere relatively close to us, and we've had some personal crises that have come up in our lives between health issues and some family member deaths and a personal issue that just happened in the last year. And what has been amazing to us is the outpouring of support that we have received in these different crises. And not only for us, but for the kids too. We've just felt like this is a second family for us. And it's just made a huge difference for us. And of course, we feel obviously very close to the choir members because of our contribution through the music program, but it's not just the choir, it goes so much beyond that. And we just feel like we belong here and that our children belong here, and this is something that has sustained us and will continue to sustain us into the future.
I guess another factor that's been critical to us and just inspiring to me is to watch the growth of our children in the church. My religious background is not strong biblically, and to watch what my children get from the program, the rotational model now, and the Sunday school program before, and their understanding of the Bible is well beyond mine at their age. And it's inspiring to me, and I like the solid foundation that they're getting here in the church, and it leads me to think that it makes our jobs easier to raise children that are grounded when they have this church family to support them in that.
It's really been a great experience. There are things I've learned about some of our members, but it's interesting that we keep coming back to some of the same themes, and I think are the things that also draw me to this church. The people are wonderful. It's a sense of family here. There is a sense of acceptance and belonging. There is a sense of tradition. I think right now there's maybe a sense of nostalgia as we're looking at the last 75 years, but it's also drawing us back to the things that were important to us as youth, and some things that we feel are important for the future of the church, which is our youth. It's just been a really rewarding experience.